many of us probably over some point in your lifetime have had a broken bone or something. Hold on. Raise your hand. I don't need to hear the story right now. Raise your hand if you've broken a bone before. Raise your hand. All right, put it down. Raise your hand if you've sprained something before. Okay. All right, so yeah, so a broken bone obviously is an injury to the skeletal system. A sprain is an injury to the skeletal-muscular system. We'll talk about what a sprain is versus other things. But let's start by talking about injuries to the skeletal system. So, a fracture. When a fracture is just another word for a broken bone. Okay? Our bones are made of living tissue. They're rigid and strong, but they can break. Okay? And a broken bone can be caused by a blow to something, to a certain bone, or other things. And there's a few types of fractures that we'll talk about. One type that's common in young children is something called a green stick fracture. And this means the name comes from, if you've ever been making a fire out at a camp or something, and a dry twig off the ground and just snap in half. But what if you try and take a branch off of a living tree and break it? Yeah, does it just snap? No, when it breaks, what is it like?
It breaks in pieces, like layers.
Yeah, it's like it breaks, but
It doesn't break.
it's still all held. There's still strands of fiber and stuff that actually is still holding it together. Well, in young bones that haven't fully calcified, that are not as rigid as they are in adulthood, well, sometimes if those bones fracture, they don't fracture cleanly and make a clean break. Part of it fractures like you see in this diagram, but some of it stays connected because it's a little bit more flexible. And so that's called a green stick fracture.
Is that the same as a buckle fracture?
No, buckle fracture I think is a little different. A buckle fracture I think is a kind of simple fracture. So a simple fracture is just basically a clean break. A bone gets broken in two pieces. That would be called a simple fracture. So in this picture here, a person has fractured what bone in this x-ray? No.
Femur.
Look at the bottom of this femur down here. Okay, you can see it's kind of hard to see, but it's offset. It's broken. That would be a really, really painful fracture. The femur is the largest bone in your body. Fracturing your femur is very painful. And so in this case, it's a simple fracture. Just it's sort of broken in two. And in this case, it's what we call displaced. It means it's fractured, but the bones are also now no longer aligned with each other. Okay? And so a fracture like this, besides being painful, would have to obviously be treated by a doctor. And what would the first step, what would they have to do to treat this first? James?
They have to move it back together.
Yeah, they have to realign the bones. I mean, if they left it like this and casted it would probably heal over time. But because it's displaced, that right leg is going to be shorter than the left leg. The alignment's not going to be correct. That person will probably always walk with a limp. So they wouldn't leave it like this. They would reset it. If you've ever heard them say, well, they have to set the bone. Means basically they have to take those bones that are not in alignment and get them so they're back where they should be, so it can heal properly.
Is it kind of like dislocating something?
No, we'll talk about that. I mean, so they have to get it back in place. So in that way, I guess it's a little bit like it. So to do this, sometimes the doctor will do it just manually using their hands. They might, if you had a fracture in your radius or something, they might grab your forearm and try and put the bones back in alignment if they're not there. And they would get them in place. Other times, if it's a serious fracture or if it's really out of alignment or if there's multiple breaks, they may have to actually do surgery to get everything sort of back in place, and then they can cast it. In some cases, they have to actually use hardware like pins and screws and things to keep all the bones in the right spot. And that's some of the things they might have to. Once they do that, the bone heals really well. Okay? bone heals better than just about any other tissue in your body. That basically, if you have a fracture like this and it's set properly and heals properly, it's going to be really just as strong, you know, after it heals as it was before the injury. So they set it, get it back in place, and then what? What else do they have?
Would they take out the pins, like if you have pins?
Yeah, usually. I mean, if it's sometimes there are pins that come out through the skin to align everything, and they would take those out. Other times they might use screws and things and leave them inside. Depends on the type of fracture. So after they get the bone set, what's the next step in helping a broken bone heal? Is that? Casting it. And casting, what usually will be done is they will cast the joint above and below the fracture. So like if you fractured your tibia, they would give you a cast, you know, probably at first over your knee and below your ankle. So those joints can't move, and the purpose of a cast is to keep everything in place so the bone can heal properly. Okay? Over time, as that bone heals, they eventually take the cast off, and that bone is healed. James?
Say like you broke a bone at one point in one place, and then later on you broke it just about the same place, maybe it's just a little bit around it. Would it still be able to like move
Yeah.
after like fully?
Yeah, probably. Probably heal fine. And after you break a bone, and I'll show you this on a slide in a couple slides, kind of after it heals, there's actually sort of an enlargement. Like my daughter, 2 years ago, she broke her collarbone playing soccer, and it healed fine. But like she can still feel like where the fracture was, like there's a little bump there. It doesn't heal smoothly. And probably for years later, like if a doctor looks at an x-ray of a fracture, they'll be able to tell where the fracture was because there's a little callus around it. Another possible thing that can happen in a fracture is a compound fracture. Compound fracture is kind of a gory fracture because not only does the bone break, it then also breaks through the skin and is exposed. So obviously, besides the broken bone, there's also damage to the skin and the muscle around that, so that has to be corrected.
Like they don't happen
What's that?
Aren't they kind of like rare and they don't like happen very often?
Not, I mean, they don't happen very often, but they happen, you know, and I'll show you, there's a picture here, and I'll warn you before I show it, from the NCAA basketball tournament, like
Yes.
3 years, hold on, 3 years ago maybe, there was a basketball player, Kevin Ware, who, he wasn't like, he didn't hit it on anything. I think he jumped and he came down in a weird way, and he fractured his tibia, and it was a compound fracture. The bone protruded out of the skin. It's really gross. His teammate, it happened right in front of his team's bench, and his teammates were freaking out because they saw this. And it's not a pleasant injury to have, but it does happen sometimes. Gavin?
Wait, how do bones like form back together?
I'll show you a slide in a couple minutes, okay?
Is this the one where like the kid was running down and he slipped and his leg went up too far in front of him?
I don't know if that's...
Like the bone was
Yeah.
was running.
I don't know, I'll show you the picture here. So some people don't like gory kind of pictures, so you don't have to look at this. I'll only show it for a few minutes, but it does show the bone coming out of the skin for this fracture. What?
Is it the video?
It's not the video. I'm not showing those two videos that Mr. O'Carey showed. So here's the picture if you want to see it. So if you're looking, so here's Kevin Ware. Here's his femur. This is his knee. This is his shin, and then his shin and mid-shin is just flopped down. Here is his tibia that's protruding through the skin.
Well, watch the video.
No. So that's not, some people look at this, they say, oh, that's his knee. That's not his knee. That's the middle of his shin, just kind of, and that's this white here is the bone sticking out.
Did it heal okay?
What? Yeah, it healed okay, yep.
All
All right, I'm not going to show these two videos.
Please.
No. So, I don't like showing those kind of videos. But,
Friday?
no, I'm not going to show them. So, they're two kind of gory videos about fractures. I don't really like showing those things. So, when bone breaks, so bone is living tissue. Inside of the bone tissue, there's blood vessels and nerves and there's bone marrow. It's living tissue. And so when the initial break happens, there's bleeding in that area, there's swelling in that area, and here you see the break. Okay? But what happens is pretty soon after the break, new bone tissue starts to kind of fill in that gap slowly over time. It starts off with sort of a spongy bone that's not very dense. It's somewhat flexible. It has room for new blood vessels to regrow in there and to help nourish that tissue. And over time, that spongy bone gets replaced with what we call compact bone. And it starts to become more dense, stronger. All the blood vessels heal. The bone marrow starts to heal until eventually it's completely healed. And again, you can see there's still this kind of enlargement here. That bone, that callus it's called, that is still present even years after the break. You would be able to see that. Okay? So that's how the bone actually heals. Just like your skin heals and regrows, bone tissue does the same sort of thing. Natalie?
I know like everything's different and it depends on the injury, but how long do you say it like takes for it to
You know, if it's a simple fracture and it's casted, usually it's about 6 weeks or so. You know, if you have a cast, you know, if you fractured your collarbone, you know, it might be 6 to 8 weeks. A more complex fracture might be longer. Kind of like you say, depends, but you know, in about 6 weeks or so.
Or what about compound fractures?
Well, the compound fracture, the bone heal is about the same but it's just then you have other tissue damage around it because as that bone pokes through the skin, obviously it damages the skin. Probably it damages some muscle and blood vessels in that area. So that stuff also needs time to heal as well. But I don't know if it's really that much longer than a simple fracture. Now, a dislocation is a different type of injury. So you could break a bone. Can you break your ankle?
Yeah.
No. Can you break your elbow?
Yeah, you can.
Because what is your elbow? Can you break your knee?
Yeah, it's ligament.
Those aren't bones. What are those? What is your knee, your elbow, your ankle?
Ligament.
Those are joints. So you can't break a joint. What you can do to a joint is dislocate the bones from that joint. So for dislocation is when the normal alignment of the bones is disturbed. It's forcibly moved out of place. So this X-ray shows a person that has a dislocation of what joint?
Elbow.
That's their elbow. So that's like a person, their hands like this. You see there's one upper arm bone, the humerus. Okay? Here you have the radius. And what you see is this little cup is where this part of the humerus should be. But it's not there anymore. So when it's in place, that allows the joint to move. This person somehow dislocated their elbow and it's not in place anymore. So if you dislocate a joint, first of all, it hurts, it's painful. Bones aren't in place. The joint doesn't move or doesn't move properly. Okay? It may look deformed. And so, what's the treatment? So how do they treat this? Haley?
Don't they just like pull it? They're supposed to be.
Yeah, they get it back into place. So like in this case, what the doctor would probably do is this person would go and they'd grab onto their forearm, kind of pull it down, and realign it. Try to get this part of the humerus back in place. And now usually if a person has a dislocated joint, it hurts, and then the doctor will reset it, get it back in alignment, and then it usually like feels much better after it's back into place. People dislocate commonly like fingers, playing basketball and things like that. Sometimes the ball comes down, it's weird, it might dislocate a finger.
Oh wait, is that like jamming it?
What's that?
It's like if you jam it.
No, jam is like a sprain. And also, or like football, hockey injuries, often if somebody gets checked or somebody goes to tackle somebody, if you go to tackle somebody playing football or something, and the impact of tackling them, it goes not like on your torso and your chest, but it comes more on your arm. You could take this shoulder and pull it out of its socket and dislocate it. And then again, the doctor will put it back in place. And the thing that happens as well is those ligaments that would normally hold your shoulder in place or hold your elbow in place, well, they can be damaged. They can be torn, they can be ripped or strained or stretched. And what that means is sometimes if a person has dislocated their shoulder 2 or 3 times, it happens much easier because those ligaments aren't holding it in so tight and they're kind of loose. Like I used to play basketball with a guy who dislocated his shoulder all the time. Like we'd be playing, somebody like bump into him, he'd like, oh, and then he just go like go and like pop it back into place. Because he had done it so many times, it was kind of loose and it wasn't really that painful for him. It hurt, but he would just pop it back into place pretty easily. So you're more prone to it if you do it repeated times. Matt?
My cousin, he like sort of like dislocated his knee, but it went off sideways.
Yeah, like his kneecap?
Yeah, he went to the doctor, and they just like he just took it and twisted
Yeah, that's all they
it
do.
and popped it back in, and they let him go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because once it's back in place, I mean, there's not a whole lot to do. You know, some of those ligaments may have to heal, but basically once it's back in place, you know, then it's going to feel much better afterwards. Haley?
My dad was like snowboarding a few years ago, and like his elbow hit the ice, and they put like pins and
Oh, yeah.
pads in it. I thought he broke it.
Probably, yeah. But it wasn't really, his elbow's probably the bone near the elbow or something.
I did pop my shoulder in a place on the bench, and one time I ran to the boards, and my shoulder popped out of place, and you could like see my bone, and my friend was like freaking out, and I popped back into place, and then my coach made me get off ice.
Yeah, we'll probably have multiple injuries like that. All right, I have another picture here if you don't like. This is a person that has dislocated their ankle. So this is a person playing softball, okay, who probably slid into a base wrong and dislocated their ankle. So their foot should be down here. This is their tibia. This ankle should be in place here, but it's completely sideways. So obviously that would be very painful. The ligaments here in this ankle are probably all damaged. The other thing that happened is when they did that, where the ligament attaches to the bone got pulled so hard, it pulled off a little sliver of bone, causing there to be a tiny little sliver of bone that got detached from the rest of the tibia there. So that's what a dislocation is. All right, it's gone. So that's a dislocation. It's moving a bone out of its normal place in a joint. All right, we're going to just talk briefly about muscles too. So I know this probably might be a review from health class, but muscle tissue is a type of body tissue that can contract, which means can get shorter or it can relax. That's really all muscles do, contract and relax. And we have 3 types of muscle in our body. Can anyone name the 3 types? Give me one. Smooth.
Wait, I just forgot.
Cardiac and skeletal. Which one is under our voluntary control, that we control with our brain, Abby? No? Skeletal. Skeletal muscle is the muscle we probably think of when we're thinking of muscle. It makes our biceps, our triceps, our pecs, our abs, all our leg muscles and so forth. That's skeletal muscle. And we control it. Right now, you're using your brain to control the skeletal muscles in your arm and your hand to write your notes. Your brain is sending messages telling those muscles how to move. They are voluntary. They're under your control. They attach to our bones, allowing us to move. Cardiac muscle will be found where? In the heart. So it's only found in the heart. And it is involuntary muscle. You don't have to like think every second, okay, I gotta beat my heart again. Gotta beat it again. It just happens on its own. It's not under our voluntary control. Heart muscle is interesting, it never tires out. It does its job, but it never gets fatigued, unlike skeletal muscle. And then we have the smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is found in many of our organs. It's in our arteries, stomach, intestine, uterus. These are where you would find smooth muscle. And again, it's involuntary. You know, you don't have to think right now, oh, that mac and cheese, I better move it a little farther along my intestine and like contract your intestine muscle to move it along. It just moves on its own, right? Your intestines are doing that. they're contracting to move food along. You don't have to think about it. So those are the 3 types of muscle.
Well, for like the test, we can give like examples of like if it's the
Yeah. Is that? Gavin?
So like, when you get like scared or something, like what muscle would make you
Get scared?
Like, does it
It's
break?
more of a nervous response.
Oh.
And it interacts with your muscles. So we have about over 600 muscles in our body, lots of small muscles that move all different parts. And muscles can pull on our bones. They cannot push our bones, however. So muscles can only pull. And the easiest way to think about it is imagine like your bicep and tricep muscles. So if you have your hand, okay, your bicep muscle is here, your tricep muscle is here. If I want to lift this tape dispenser and bend my elbow, right now as I hold it straight out, my bicep muscle is relaxed. It's elongated. And what happens is my brain tells my bicep muscle to contract, and it starts to shorten. It contracts. And as it does, it's pulling on the bones in my forearm, and it's pulling them up. So as I lift this up, my bicep muscle contracts. It gets smaller. And now at the same time, my tricep muscle is relaxing. Eventually, I get it all the way up here, and my bicep muscle is shortened. If you bend your elbow, you can feel your bicep. It's shortened. It's tighter. Okay? But now my bicep can't push this back down. My bicep's kind of stuck this way. So how do I get this tape dispenser back down? My tricep muscle takes over. When my tricep muscle right now is stretched out and relaxed, when I contract it and shorten it, it pulls here, okay, on my humerus, and it pulls my hand back down. So I could tighten my bicep and pull it up, tighten my tricep, that pulls it down. And that's how many of our muscles work. They work in opposites. Okay? That's why you have a muscle in the front of your leg. Okay? Okay, that's for straightening your leg. And a muscle in the back of your leg, your hamstring, and that's what bends your leg back at your knee. So these muscles work in opposite pairs. They're called flexors and extensors. So by using our muscles and sort of stressing them, we can make them stronger. Our muscles adapt to the stresses we put on them. If you go to the gym and you lift weights and stress your muscles in that way, they respond by growing a little bit larger, a little bit stronger. If you run today at a certain speed, your muscles adapt and become more efficient. And then you could run a little bit faster the next day or run for a little bit longer. So training allows our muscles to get better and better. Now, some people can take that to extreme conditions like this is Mr. Arcuri back when he used to work out. Obviously he stopped since, but so you can increase the size of your muscles, okay, by using them more. There's going to be these pictures throughout this whole unit. Has anyone ever seen the body exhibit? It's put on by like Discover. They have one in New York City, and there's a couple others. So this is like a museum exhibit you might go to. And what they've done is they've taken human bodies, people that have, after they've died, given their bodies to science, for example. And what they do is they display them in certain ways to help people learn about the human body. And this is one of the exhibits from that bodies exhibit. This is showing the muscular system. So these were two actual people. They died, obviously, but they took their bodies and preserved them. And they are showing only the muscle of these people. They took all the skin off. This next one shows again, is they took all the skin off, and this person's holding it. So this skin actually was on this person when they were alive. And they're holding it. And you can see all of the muscle that underlies that skin.
How are they not like
because they preserve them with different chemicals, just like, you know, the frogs we look at and the grasshoppers in a preservative. There are certain chemicals that prevent the breakdown of organic matter, and they use those. And so that's another one for that body's example.
How come like the feet look like the feet and hands look so much different from that?
I don't know, because they probably left some of the fat. So between the muscle and the skin, there's also a layer of fat. And so there's a lot in, you know, the feet and stuff, and maybe they left some of that in there. I'm not exactly sure. All right. So you'll see different pictures from different units. All right, this is your last slide, but I have a few things I'll talk about. So tendons and ligaments. We talked about them in the skeletal system. We'll just mention them again now. So tendons connect bones to muscle. As I just said, our bone's job is to pull on our muscle's job is to pull on our bones. And they connect to our bones through tendons. Muscles basically turn into tendon and attach to the bone. If you bend your elbow like a little bit and feel in like the crook of your elbow there, that hard, you may think it's a bone. That's not a bone. That's actually a tendon. That's your bicep tendon. That connects your bicep muscle to the bones in your forearm. It feels really hard and strong because they are. It's very tough, durable tissue. What is probably the one tendon you can name in your body? Your Achilles tendon. So above your back of your shoe and your heel, that thing you feel, that is not bone. Although it feels really strong and hard, that's tendon. That tendon connects your calf muscle to your heel bone, and that's your Achilles tendon. If you feel in the back of your knee like there's those two like strings almost, they feel like those are tendons. In the back of your hand, these lines, those aren't bones. Those are the tendons that control your fingers. So these tendons are very strong, and they connect our muscles to our bones.
If you're like double jointed, does that mean you have two tendons?
No, it just means your joints are a little more flexible. I think there's a picture here. If you don't like the pictures, I'm going to show you this. This is the Achilles tendon. Oh, so that's what it looks like. It's just a diagram of your Achilles tendon. It connects the calf muscle to the heel. This next one is a real picture of a surgery. So this is a person's foot. Here's the back of their heel. And this doctor is probably reattaching this Achilles tendon because sometimes it gets ruptured, it may detach, it can be damaged, and he's probably trying to reattach it to their heel bone. But this white thing, that is not a bone. That's the tendon. That's the Achilles tendon that they're holding on.
You know, like Achilles are like pop water.
It can rupture, you can damage it.
Yeah.
All right, it's off the
You, like,
screen.
damage it.
It takes a long time to heal. It's like in sports and stuff, it's a really hard injury to come back from. You can't walk for a while if you damage your Achilles. Because again, your calf muscles move your foot up and down and stuff. And if your Achilles is broken, not working properly, you can't move your feet very well.
What's your ACL?
We'll talk about that right now. So ligaments connect our muscles to our bones. And I'm sorry, our bones to our bones. And they keep our joints together. So your shoulder, your humerus stays in the shoulder socket because it's all wrapped up with a whole bunch of ligaments that keep it there. Okay? What is the ligament you could probably name? ACL, anterior cruciate ligament. It is a ligament that's inside of our knee that helps stabilize our knee. Why have you heard about it probably? It's a common sports injury. People can tear their ACL if they cut the wrong way or if they're hit a certain way, and it's an injury that takes a long time to recover from, 6 to 9 months to almost a year sometimes, if a person tears their ACL. Doctors try to reconstruct it using tissue from another part of their body, but really it's never quite the same as it was before.
What are these tendons?
Those are tendons in your wrist, yep. Yeah, because that's the muscles pull on the tendons and that moves your hand. I have a picture here of that somewhere. Oh, don't look for a minute if you don't like the pictures. So this just shows the tendons in a person's hand.
Is that like cut open?
Yeah,
How did
and you can see these tendons moving as the person moves their fingers.
Wait, why is it not perfect?
I don't know if they're doing like a surgery to help repair something there that they were exposed and they took the video when it was exposed.
You do like special effect.
So you can see as you pull on your hands and fingers, those tendons are pulling, causing your fingers to actually move.
Okay, that's gross.
All right, last slide. I'll just talk about these things real quick. You don't have to write anything. So when you sprain, what's a common joint to sprain? Your ankle. Or what do people sometimes say? You did what to your ankle? Rolled your ankle. You ever hear that saying? Like if you have your foot sideways and put your full weight on it, you could stretch or tear some of those ligaments that hold your ankle in place, and that's what a sprain is. If you sprain something, you damage the tendons in that joint, and they need time to heal. It swells up, could be painful. Here's a picture of somebody that sprained their ankle. You can see a huge amount of swelling right around that ankle joint. Tendons can also have problems. Tendinitis is when the tendons get inflamed and painful, sometimes due to overuse. A strain is when a tendon can be like torn from the bone. My father had trigger finger. He had to have surgery for it. It's when sometimes if you bend your finger and it won't straighten on its own, you have to kind of force it, and you could have surgery to like unlock that tendon. Tennis elbow or golfer's elbow comes from like repeated overuse, and the tendons could come out of their sheaths and become swollen and painful. So there's lots of different types of injuries to these systems. Gavin?
What is hyperextend?
Hyperextend means when a joint, so obviously your elbow is supposed to bend this far. If you force it to bend too much, you could damage some of those ligaments, and it means like overextend something. So if you hyperextend your knee goes like in, or your arm bends too much.
You know how you have like this
Between your back,
could you like break that?
they can rupture, like a person's discs between their vertebrae that cushion you. Like it's called a slipped disc sometimes. A person might have like a lot of back pain. Sometimes they might do surgery to reduce them. The swelling may cause things.
So I've broken my tibia and my tibia in the same leg.
Yeah.
Is that bad?
I mean, it's not good, but they both heal. So.
And then, like a couple of years ago, I broke the same bone again.
Yeah, it happens, yeah. It's not. So I guess that's just the way it is.